When I saw this schedule, I thought, well, no one is going to come to hear me talk because there were so many other things that I thought were appealing. So I'm honored that you would come, and I pray that the time will be beneficial to us as we endeavor to think about a little bit more about wonder and what does that look like practically. If I may, to get us started, I'd like to share a brief prayer from a book that's a book of liturgy called Every Moment Holy. If you're not familiar with this, I would encourage you to jot that down. Does anybody have this or already familiar with it? Excellent. And I think there's multiple volumes, but I confess I only have the first one. But I would like to use this as our opening prayer. This is a liturgy that is entitled To Begin a Purposeful Gathering. This seemed better than the prayer before changing a dirty diaper. It seemed like that's an actual prayer. It seemed like a better choice. So let this be our moment of being poised and still before the Lord. Gracious and good Father, so we are here gathered uniquely in all of history. We particular people in this singular time and place. Father, accomplish your purposes among us. Tune our hearts to the voice of your Spirit. Wake us to be present to you and to one another in these shared hours we are given. For it is you, O Lord, who have so gathered us from our various places, and you alone who know our hearts and our needs. Among us are some who arrive anxious, some who are lonely, some who suffer pain or sorrow. May we in our joys find grace to enter the sorrows of others. Among us are some who arrive rejoicing, hearts made light by good news, good health, glad anticipation. May we in our sorrows find grace to embrace the joys of others. Let us prize these moments and care for one another deeply for each of us. And our relationships to one another are precious and fleeting. Let us prize these moments and care for one another deeply for each of us. Our relationship to one another are precious and eternal. Father, breathe upon our gathering, O Spirit of God. Grant each of us a place to humbly receive, to faithfully serve, that we might know in this brief gathering a foretaste of that greater communion yet to come. Father, enlarge our hearts. Spirit, expand our vision. Christ, establish your kingdom among us. Be at work even now, O Lord. May your will in us, in these hours, be accomplished. And let all God's people say, amen. So I would encourage you, if this is not already on your bookshelf, that might be something that would be a blessing to you. Again, I want to say welcome and thank you for being here. My name is Amy Martin, and you are in my house, my queendom, I tell my students. It's a little eclectic, a little messy, and that pretty much sums up me. But I have to tell you that I absolutely am living the dream of my childhood. I was the kid who lined up all the bears and the dolls and taught them things and then scolded them. You know, I was that kid. Teaching is the family business. My mom is a stellar teacher, and my grandmother and aunt, and on and on and on. Maybe you can relate to that. Maybe teaching is a family business for you. I have taught in a public school setting, in a large high school. Let me just back up and say I graduated with 15 in my high school class. I mean, really small. My hometown had no stoplight, no Sonic. That's how remote and rural my community was. And then I went on to teach in a 2,000 member student body, so it was rather staggering, and I often had other teachers asking for my hall pass, when I first started teaching. inner city school, and then I taught in a private Christian school. Then I have had the sheer blessing and honor of working alongside my husband, who is a minister. So I've taught lots and lots of Bible class to lots of different ages. And I have had the privilege of homeschooling my children. And then the Lord plucked me from that, what I thought was the dream job, and placed me in a very challenging, but as is true with most plans that the Lord has, it has proved to be the richest, deepest blessings to be a part of this school. So that's a little bit where I'm coming from. I'm also the mom of 3 boys. Our oldest is getting ready to go to law school in the fall. Middle one is the life. He is a party on wheels. He's at the college. And then our youngest is a freshman here. When our oldest, before he had words, picture this big, blue-eyed, blonde, curly, dimpled yumminess. Before he had words, it was in the era when, and I don't even know if moms do this anymore, but there was an era where moms would teach sign language to their kids. Any other parents? This one, what's this one? More cookie. That's really all. More cookie. He had that down pretty solid. And please and thank you. He had some of those. That was really the extent of what we got to, but he really had more and cookie down pretty well. But even before the sign language, he would make this adorable little sound. He'd go, and it would just get higher and higher until you would respond. And the question was always, what's that? What's that? What's that? And so he was fascinated with bugs and bunnies and books and, if I'm really honest, boogers, because moms of boys, anyone? Yeah, so, but I did not have to teach him to be inquisitive or to be interested in things, right? That wasn't something he had to be taught. It was just, that's how he came, that's how he arrived, right? That he was just interested. So with our time today, and I realize I think Dr. Mack said 10 minutes late or so. Here's my objective, thesis. I want to do 3 things. I want us to talk about what is wonder. And I told Andrew earlier, I did not realize that Dr. Clark was going to speak about wonder. But it really will dovetail beautifully with us thinking about maybe some nuts and bolts and some practical questions. Yes, that was beautiful and profound. Now what? That kind of a thing. That's what I hope that we can think about. So the first thing I want to talk about, what is wonder? What is the nature of it? What does it look like? And the second thing is there anything that hinders or thwarts or squashes that thing that should be there, right? And then the third obvious thing is how do we get rid of any encumbrances that would keep that wonder from being in our own hearts and in our students' minds. So that's kind of where we're going. Okay, so this is the point in time where I take just a moment to come over to the whiteboard. It's always dangerous to write on the whiteboard, because your ability to spell when you're in front of people with a marker is like gone, gonzo. Like, I don't know how to spell my name. It just happens. And you'll love me anyway, or you don't, and that's, anyway. So what, huh?
You're being vulnerable.
I'm being vulnerable. That's all I've got. Okay, so one of the things that I like to do with my students, and which, by the way, this is one of my students back here. This is Aaliyah. She's lovely, lovely. Glad you're here, Aaliyah. She's going to be familiar with this. So one of the things that I like to do is I want to start with thinking about definitions. I said we're going to define what? Wonder. So here, let's see if I can spell it. Perfect. Are we good? Good, yeah. So this is, and you probably already do this, and forgive me if it seems too infantile. But I want you to start with thinking about what are all the categories, or what kind of thing is wonder? What kind of thing is it? So this is Aristotle's Canons of Rhetoric. This would be invention. This would be like one of the very first things about defining, right? think about it in terms of term, category, distinction, right? So here's the term I'm wanting to define. What kind of category, what kind of thing is it? This is a point in time where you lean over to your friend and you test the waters. Go ahead. Lean and test, then tell me. I'm looking for you to lean. No leaners. Lean and test and then tell. Lean, test, tell. It's abstract? Okay. This is also, yes? Anything else?
I said exploration.
Oh, okay. It's an exploration. Good. Oh, this is where you stroke your chin and say, very interesting. Yeah, it's a noun and it's a verb. Good. Yes, are you the only? Oh, we have two bearded wonders. Okay, good. Anything else? Any other categories? Ooh, I like that one. Thank you very much. Good. It's an emotion. Anything else you'd say? Yes? Yes. That's good. For the sake of time, we could go on and on and on, but you get the idea. We're going to go, here's the term. How would we categorize that thing, right? And then we then are going to say, how would it be distinct? Let's, for example, say that we're going to use posture. Okay, let's say we're going to use posture. So wonder is a kind of posture. How is it different from other kinds of postures? How is it different? What makes it distinct? Okay, you want to throw this back over here. So wonder is a posture that involves exploration. Good, yeah?
Wide open.
Ooh.
Posture wide open instead of holding back. I don't care.
Oh, okay, so we could say, can we say open? Yeah?
What about positive?
It's an open, what's positive?
It's not a negative thing. It's something. The glass is half full.
So when you say that, it's positive. Okay, it's a positive emotion? I don't know. Is anybody, if you're a mom of boys, sometimes there's things that you're wondering about that.
There's negative wonder.
Yeah. So we're going to make a distinction. This one's positive. Yes. Positive. Good. Yeah. Something else? Yeah.
Characterized by amazement.
Ooh. Shall we put this here, my friend? I don't get it. Is that where you put it? Ooh, yeah. There's open and amazement. Good. So you see how we could go on and on and on with this as well. Isn't this a fun practice? Don't you like this? And it brings up a lot of different different ideas. I did this activity with Leah's class yesterday, something like that. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that if we went on, you probably would come to, was they used the word that it's a reaction to. It's a reaction to something.
It's kind of a choice, actually.
Yes. So I want us to think about, I have some quotes that I want to draw our attention to. And this is certainly one of the best places for us to start when we think about wonder, amazement. My definition would be that it is a feeling, a posture, a reaction to, a feeling of admiration for something that is beautiful, something that is true, something that is good, right? There might be some kinds of wonder that we would, I can't believe that this is appalling, this is awful. But that's not what we're talking about when we talk about wonder in this context. And certainly what Dr. Clark has had us think about, right? It's about wondering about being beckoned by the truth. Yes, please.
Creates a space.
Wonder creates the space. Right, and how about his poised and still? And I don't know who the gentleman was that made the comment there at the end about, is the posture that Sarah said, this posture? Is it of the one who's minting or the one who's being moved? Right? Isn't that essentially what that gentleman was asking? Right. Maybe it has to be both. Right? Maybe it's both. So I bring us back to Proverbs, the first chapter, and I'm sure your mind is already gone here, but the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. This fear, this awe, this wonder, this reverence, this recognition of something that is bigger and more than me, outside of me, that demands my attention. It is this posture of openness, this posture of openness and humility. Some other quotes just to reinforce this idea. Plato says philosophy begins in wonder. Thomas Aquinas says wonder is a kind of desire for knowledge, this openness, this hands open to receive, right? You can't catch something if your hands aren't open, right? If your arms are crossed and you are not even looking for the ball to come your way, you're not going to catch it, right? On the basketball court. We just finished basketball season, so that I had to throw that in for my son. Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson says the mark of wisdom is to see the miraculous even in the common. So to be open to even everyday things as being a miraculous. It's a kind of wonder. William Butler Yeats even says the world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper. Acorn weevils. I hadn't thought of that as being wonderful, but perhaps, yes, it is, right? Here's a poem that I thought was interesting. The poet William Martin writes to instruct parents. This isn't very long and not necessarily an old classic, but it's kind of interesting. Listen to this. He says, "Do not ask your children to strive for extraordinary lives. Such striving may seem admirable, but it's the way of foolishness. Help them instead to find the wonder and the marvel of an ordinary life. Show them the joy of tasting tomatoes, apples, pears. Show them how to cry. Show them how to cry when pets and people die. Show them the infinite pleasure in the touch of a hand, and make the ordinary come alive for them. The extraordinary will take care of itself." Two more quotes and then we'll move on. You forgive me if I'm not saying this name right. There's a French philosopher, A.G. Sertalange. Did I say it right? Did I kill it? Or butcher it? I'm not sure which. His book is entitled The Intellectual Life, and he summarizes Thomas Aquinas' 16 precepts. And his premise is that every intellectual work begins by a moment of ecstasy. Only in the second place does the talent of arrangement, the technique of transitions, the connection of ideas, construction come into play. Now, what is this ecstasy but a flight upward, away from self, this posture of this openness to something that is bigger than ourselves? He says, a flight upwards, away from self, forgetting to live our own poor life in order that the object of our delight may live in our thought and in our heart. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Christopher Perrin. Are you familiar with Dr. Perrin? Some yes, some no. I would encourage you to jot down, to go check out. I'm pretty confident you can find these just on YouTube, but he did a series of lectures through the Classical Academic Press about the 8 principles for cultivating truth, goodness, and beauty. And he had one section in particular that spoke about cultivating wonder. And he says this: children are naturally set to wonder and delight in truth, goodness, beauty. They are easily cultivated to continue in wonder. Do we really have a student if he's not still wondering at the cosmos? The Latin studium, from which student is derived, means eagerness, zeal, enthusiasm, even fondness and affection. I'm sure that's exactly what you see every day, every single day. Eagerness on the edge of their seats. More. So, if in fact wonder is an inherent nature that we have, right? Okay, this is the point where I'm going to try to do this object lesson. It may be a flop, but we'll try it anyway. So if in fact, the same way that a lighter is designed to light and have a flame, right? In the same way, if we are designed for a posture of wonder and openness, to learn, to grow, to be in awe. Can we agree on that? Are we all on board with that? If that's the design and that's the way that it should be, I want us to think now to the second part and talk and think about what are the things that hinder and keep that from happening and being true in our classrooms. That's kind of where we're moving. Okay, one more step I've got to come back to. So it's inherent. It's necessary for teaching to occur, right? You can't catch the ball if your hands aren't up and you're looking to see where it's coming from, right? So first point, wonder is inherent. You must have it to learn, to grow, to be educated. So then we come to what are some things that keep that from, what are some obstacles? Some reasons that our students, or maybe if we're honest, even ourselves, why don't we wonder? What's keeping us from doing that? Now, I realize we have a limited time, so we, in the same way that we came up with our own, well, let's just take a second. What would you say? What ideas would you throw out? What comes readily to your mind? Let's do the lean and check. Lean and check. What might be a reason that wonder might be dampened, hindered, thwarted? Lean and check, and then talk to me in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Love it. Okay, so what do you think? What? Brother.
No, just the cell phone.
Brother John says the cell phone. Screens.
It's hard, and it's work.
Sure. How many of you have policies about technology in your classrooms? Is that a thing? Some yes, some no. Yeah. So maybe even literally in your classroom, you're fighting that. Is it an issue outside of your classroom even? Sure. Yeah. I even the attempt to concentrate, right? It's a real struggle for all of us if we're honest. Sure. And is there anything else that you can think of? Oh, talk to me about that for a minute more.
So if somebody is really excited about something and everybody else isn't excited or actively says that's not cool, then that wonder just falls apart.
We're going to talk more about that. I'm so glad that you said that. I can't read your name from here. Krista, thank you. Thanks, Krista. Any other thoughts?
A lot of times, they might have a ton of assignments, and so they might have stayed up until 2 the night before, and so they're exhausted coming to school.
Just physically don't have the capacity to be on the edge. Yes?
You have experienced failure in the classroom. So
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It kind of comes back to what Krista was saying. Good. What were you?
discouragement.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I know that we could spend a lot of time talking about that. I mostly, I have 3 things that I want to talk about. And some of them you've already have talked about. And then I want to spend the bulk of our time talking about maybe some tools, some suggestions that I could offer to you. And then I'd love to hear what ideas can you give to me as well. What can we share? The first one. Okay, so here we go. This is the point in time where I'm going to try this. So if this, in fact, is our students, and they have the capacity, they were made to, right? But yet, They are, here's my first one, which you've already said, they are over, right? They are over busy. We have too much going on. And that might be a question of they're involved in too many extracurricular things. Maybe our school day is too long. Maybe we have too many subjects, too many things, too many classes that we're trying to give them. Maybe in our own classes. Maybe we just need to pare it down, simplify it, and give time for it to breathe. Give space for the bread to rise. You know what I'm saying? So it may be that there's not the wonder because we're over busy. They're dragging backpacks around that way. This is Angeline in the hallway. Go ahead and wave, Angeline. Her backpack, and there's Leah also. Their backpacks easily weigh twice as much as they do, and they're just, they're overburdened mentally and physically. Is there a way that we need to consider paring things down to leave more room for wonder? That's one question. Again, back to Christopher Perrin, he makes reference. There's another great little video clip that he talks about multum non multa, this quality over quantity, right? It's the question of, would you rather have something small? Would you rather have one small Ghirardelli chocolate, or would you like to have 20 Easter wax bunnies? You know what I'm saying? Those Easter, don't waste your time on that, right? Just give me the one perfect dark chocolate from Ghirardelli, and then we're good to go. So that maybe is one thing you need to think about individually and as a school. The second thing, here we go. We're going to try to do this again. This one might, I realized that I made reference to students being over busy. Okay, here's the second one. Second one, ready? This one, under virtuous. It might be that you were over busy, but it might be that you're under virtuous. Now, I totally get that they are mushed together, and I absolutely get that for sure. But in general, are there things in which our students need to address sin in their lives? Are there vices? Are there genuine considerations of pride or envy or slothfulness? Heaven forbid, right? And in our students or even in our own lives, right? We must be people, if we are wanting to pass on this kind of living, this way of life, we ourselves must be people of wonder. We must have this posture, right? This open and humble posture. And so the second one is, are there questions of sin or a lack of moral virtue that we must address so that it leaves room for wonder, room for this pursuit of truth, this way of life? Okay, so the third one, here's the third one. Another preposition. Over busy, under virtuous, or the third one is are out of control thoughts. Out of control thoughts. So instead of being outward focused in contemplation of wonder and this thing that we ought to be, or this one that we ought to be in wonder of, we're too busy in our heads with junk that we're telling ourselves, or our students are saying to themselves. And I want to, so this is where I want to spend the rest of our time together. I realize that this may not have the same kind of classical aura that maybe some other things, but I feel like more and more what I'm seeing, and maybe you're seeing, is kids that are anxious, more and more anxious. They have more, and maybe it's always been this way. Maybe when I was a junior in high school, I was thinking a lot more about Ross Limbaugh than I was about English grammar. Maybe it was just me that was that way. But it feels as though things are more and more anxious. There's things that I wonder as teachers, is there a way that we can help them think about that more clearly? Are there thoughts that we could help by practicing and passing on to them different ways of thinking that would lead to wonder, would lead to greater understanding of truth, goodness, and beauty? Okay, so here's the point where I'm going to offer another book that maybe is something that you're not familiar with, that also is maybe a step out of the classical realm. But I would offer it to you for a point of consideration. A few years ago, I stumbled across a TED Talk by a woman by the name of Dr. Brene Brown. Is anybody familiar with her at all? Okay, good, good, good. Well, she is a researcher, a professor at a university down in Houston, and her research is focused on the question of vulnerability, and that's the part of the title that I'm wanting to make the connection to wonder. What's the connection there? But the book that I would most readily, and she's written lots of books, very mainstream. There may be things that are helpful to you, maybe not. But in this book, Dare to Lead, she addresses and talks about in the classroom. What does it look like in the classroom for you to lead your students with courage? Why does and not only in your classroom, but helping your students become courageous, brave students that are indeed full of wonder? Because my contention is going to be that there is a connection there. That I cannot be full of wonder if I am also not vulnerable and courageous. Maybe we should stop for a second and talk about the word vulnerable. When you hear that word, what comes to mind? Good word or bad word when you hear it? If I say, we're all going to be vulnerable now, you're all like, I picked the wrong room. I'm out. We're all now going to confess our sins. I'm sorry, I talked over you.
Is injured. To be hurt or injured.
I think it's a good word
Okay.
unless somebody exploits it. I think if you're with somebody that you know that you can be open with, and they're not going to take advantage of that, then it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But if people take, if you have students that are making fun of somebody because they said they were open about this or that, it can be very painful.
When I hear, go ahead. No, you're good.
I think in that book, I've only read a portion of it, but she was talking about how like the space has to feel safe in order for you to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think as teachers, it's such a weighty responsibility to create that environment where kids do feel like they can share, and even just answering a question, but every kid should feel like they can speak and that their voice is heard.
Right, right. Because otherwise, you really are dampening wonder, right? Right. You can't. I don't think that you can wonder in a community without being vulnerable. And I love the way that you've said that. There is a potential, right? There is a potential for a risk because you're emotionally exposed. Brene Brown says the definition of vulnerability is uncertainty. Uncertainty. There are things that are out of your control. If I'm quiet, I'm still controlling, right? At least I perceive that. Was it Abraham Lincoln who says something about, and I think it's even, there's even a proverb that's, he probably springboarded, that it's better to be quiet and thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Isn't this something like that? So that's one way of controlling. And she says this being vulnerable, there is this risk, but she goes on to say it's not a weakness. In fact, it's our most accurate measure of courage, being willing to show up and be seen when we can't control the outcome, being willing to create courageous spaces so we can be fully seen. She goes on to say it is the core, the heart, the center of meaningful experiences, right? You're not, unless you're willing to be able to be open and honest and real with someone, to be known, that's the real core of a loving relationship. And she says a healthy relationship. She springboards from a Theodore Roosevelt's speech that I'm sure you're familiar with, a quote from Man in the Arena. I'd like to read that to you, and then I'm going to give you some tools for suggestions for building some vulnerability. Here's the quote. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcomings. But who does not actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, great devotions, who spends himself in worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So being willing to be in the arena, to be seen, willing to make mistakes, risk being hurt, only then can we be open to wonder, and only then can our students be open to wonder and having real community. So what does this look like practically? I have 4 things that I'm going to suggest. And of course, there's lots more. You probably have some things that you could share, and I hope that we have time in the end for you to make some suggestions. But the first and foremost, our eyes must be up. Eyes must be up. And we must keep our eyes on the wonderful, right? We must keep our eyes on the wonderful. Colossians 3, second verse talks about set your minds on things above. Philippians 4 talks about the things that we ought to keep our thoughts focused on, right? If I had one verse that I have pointed to students to, do you have like a pet verse that this is when students come to you, you always find a way that this is the verse that usually is the answer? Philippians is my go-to. I don't know if you've got a go-to, but feel free to use that. There's a beautiful passage in the 2nd chapter that we have this example of Jesus, right, who humbles himself even to the point of death. And then on in the 4th chapter, be anxious for nothing. This is the 4th chapter, 6th verse. This is my go-to. Oh, you are having a crummy day? Here you go. And then, here you go. This is it. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, shall guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatever's true, whatever's honorable, whatever's right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence, if anything worthy of praise, let your minds dwell on these things, right? This is the thing that you should be wondering about. The things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things. And the God of peace shall be with you. If we want to increase vulnerability, increase wonder, which is really the core ingredient, right, for them to learn, right? We must keep our eyes as educators on the true source of goodness, right? And then in turn, hopefully they will model that. So eyes up, keep our eyes on the wonderful. Focus on the virtues. Back to if part of our obstacles are this lack of, how did I word that? How did I say that? I said under virtuous. Now we need to focus on the fruit of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are the things that we're focusing on. Again, it's an outward focus. I think one of the biggest problems and the lack of wonder comes from I'm thinking more about me than I am about the Lord or anything else, right? I'm worried about what you think about me, and I'm wondering about how I feel, and that's the. I think that's probably the overarching wonder killer. It's too much about me. Again, back to Philippians. Each of you should not look only out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. Philippians. that should be where you should camp out if you have time. So keep your eyes up on the wonderful and pursuing these virtues. The second one, this one I'm going to say it's a looking out. This is when you are purposefully looking to build the relationships with your students. What does that look like day to day? I don't know if you're familiar with this book. This is called Awakening Wonder by Sally Clarkson. Anybody familiar with this one? A homeschool mother. She's written quite a few books, and some of her children are grown. Also are authors and successful in their own right. But it's entitled Awakening Wonder, Opening Your Child's Heart to the Beauty of Learning. So this is in the context of a family. So there's some ways that she's makes some beautiful a case for wonder, and what does that look like. So that I can recommend that book to you as well. And this is one of the quotes that I pulled out of this. Students need to feel loved and accepted. I think someone said that. I can't remember who said that now. But when individuals are unconditionally accepted, they're set free to live into their own abilities, skills, and passions. They are more likely to be motivated to contribute from their own natural resources, right? They have to feel safe, protected, and that this is a place where it's okay to make a mistake. We're gonna be able to love each other and keep moving forward. And it has to begin with you modeling that, right? That we personally have to be vulnerable enough that we show them this is what it looks like. Imitate me as I imitate the Lord, right? That has to be part of it. People like people who like them, right? You need to find ways that you like your students, and you should tell them what you like about them. Often. Look for it. And then tell them. This is a part of you being vulnerable, and this is a way of you building that relationship. This looks like writing notes. This looks like smiling at them. This looks like calling them by name. This looks like telling them embarrassing stories about yourself, whatever it is. When I was in grad school, the head of the department, when I was doing my grad work, he was a very, very busy man. He had his hands in lots of different things. But I may get emotional just talking about it. I never went into his office and he never said to me, "Oh, I don't have time. Can you come back later?" That never happened. He would always stop, look me in the eye. "I'm so glad to see you. What's going on? How can I help you?" It didn't matter. I could see that his pile was high and deep and wide. But it connect so well back to what Dr. Clark was saying about we are teaching, we are loving future kings and queens and these are heirs of the kingdom of heaven. And so my students will tell you sometimes I might say I'm too busy, but I have to say that I think it's admirable that I should be less busy, back to maybe some of my earlier points. So that's the second one. Third thing, we maybe need to look over. And when I say look over, I mean examine what we value. We maybe need to examine what we value. So back to this idea, I think, Krista, you said something about peer pressure. I'm going to put this do you think it's fair to put it in the box of perfectionism? Do you think that's something your students wrestle with? Perfectionism? Yeah? Maybe even you, I won't make you raise your hand, but maybe we might have tendencies to have a heightened sense of desire to do things just perfectly. And I think I'm going to propose to you there might be a flaw in that. And the flaw is that is based in a concern for what others think, rather than a focus on I'm pursuing excellence, I'm pursuing knowledge, I'm pursuing this. Perfectionism, and maybe that word has connected, it has an extra backpack of expectations of what do other people think of me, right? So I wonder if we ourselves, and maybe what we're talking to our students about is this, we should strive for healthy pursuits of excellence. We should strive for empathy for one another. right? Rather than perfectionism, we are evaluating our values to pursue relationships and excellence. The second part of that is to contemplate, and this I would point you back to Brene Brown's question of values. She does this exercise in there that I think is kind of interesting. We won't have time to really go through all of it, but I'll pass this around and let you look at it and see what you think of it. She gives a list of values, and one of the exercises she suggests is that you should be able to articulate what you value in 2 words. Right? You're like, oh, that's hard. I don't know that I could. She herself, her 2 values are faith and I've forgotten whether she calls it wholeheartedness or courage. It's something along those lines. But so every decision that she makes, she filters it through her values. Am I going to say yes to this? I've been asked to do, you name it, you fill in the blank. You've been asked to do X, Y, Z, right? And then you ask yourself, does that uphold my values of this? Now, you may or may not like this list. This is her list. So if you have a problem, you can just send a letter to her, an email or something. But it's meant to just spark some thought. If you had to articulate, these are my 2 core values. This is what I think is the most important. This is how I decide what I'm going to do, where I'm going to do, where I'm going to do, where I'm going to go. You see what I'm saying, right? And so then you think about your students. What is it that you really value, right? Sometimes, and this kind of moves into my next thing, is sometimes our students are so short-sighted. And truth be told, we all are, right? We're too short-sighted. They're thinking about the ACT. They're thinking about the getting to the right college. Like they're just thinking like this very next step. But if we take a step back and we think about what is the most important value or 2 most important values, right? How do you live authentically, wholeheartedly, courageously, with vulnerability to uphold those values in your life? So that is one activity that I could offer for your consideration. The other thing that she suggests kind of goes back to your other people's opinions, perfectionism. It's the old comparison game. I'm sure you never do that. I never do that. But other people I've heard do that. Thanks, John. If we just stop for a second, I said something about, I want you to think of a time when you received criticism. How many of us could go zinging back to that moment, or many moments if you have those in your back pocket, but like you have in your mind, I think we probably all could say, here's a moment that I was criticized and this is how it felt and this is what was circumstances. The exercise that she brings to mind in this Dare to Lead book, she asked the question, whose feedback or opinion really matters? Whose opinion really matters? And it's really easy for us to lose, we let everybody's opinion matter. And maybe I'm not speaking, I'm not ringing your bell, and if that doesn't make sense to you, then just ignore me and I'm going to talk to those of you who it does for just a minute. You know what I'm saying? That we sometimes let everybody's opinion matter. And I wonder if our students do that. If they let everybody's opinion and feedback matter. So she does this activity where she talks about a square squad. Where she says, I think I have enough of these, where she says you should get a square of 1 inch by 1 inch or so. And what you should do is you should write 4 names. Well, I think maybe it's more. However many names that you can fit on this size of paper. These are the people that you value their opinions the most. This is my husband, right? This is, you fill it in. Who is this? Who is the one who will speak the truth to you? Who will love you when you go kerplop? Here's the one that you show them what you're really struggling with so that they can give you honest, real feedback, right? Not everybody gets to be on my square squad. I will be nice to you and I will listen to what you have to say, but you don't make it to my square squad, you know? And this is not something we're going to make public, but I wonder if it would be a helpful activity for us to think about. Filtering whose opinion matters. These are the people who will speak truth, that I can be vulnerable with, and that I value their wise, godly counsel, square squad. So list of values, consider your values, consider who you're listening to. Last, here's my, no, it's not last. Sorry, this is still under looking over. This is examining. Okay. Oh, this is so good. I love this. She calls this confabulation. Okay. Oh, this is so good. Okay. She says, Dr. Brene Brown, she says that we are hardwired for story. I kind of like that. I kind of think that's true. That we're it's one of the reasons why God came in the form of Jesus. So because we love story. We need story. It makes sense to us. That's how we're hardwired, right? And so what happens is when there are bits and pieces of the story that are missing, we confabulate and we connect the dots. We fill in what we think is true, right? Confabulate. Now, sometimes we're right, but sometimes we're not right. We just make the jumps and connect the dots, and we don't check our stories. So if I had, if this is look over and examine, it means check your stories. If I'm worried about peer pressure, right, I am filling in the blanks for what I think Emily thinks about me. She looked away at me, and she wasn't looking at me when I was talking, so that must mean that she thinks I'm an idiot. Right? I'm confabulating, right? And we do that. Our students do that. And I'm wondering if instead, it comes back to this idea of wonder. Instead of confabulating, we need to ourselves, and we do this, if we're honest, even about our students. Oh, that student is sick again, and it's the day of the recitation, right? I'm confabulating. I bet they're really sick, right? But instead, we should be open-fisted. We should be humble. We should be curious. Instead of jumping to assume, we should be jumping to ask. And it's really a natural reaction. It shouldn't be natural, but if I'm honest, too often I jump instead of ask. Right, so that's another thought. So you yourself need to check your confabulation. Be curious, ask questions, and it might be about your feelings, and it might be about your students' feelings or their actions. And it should look a little bit like, tell me more about that. Tell me more. Just like that. Now I'm showing interest. I'm open to the possibility that there's more that I don't know. Leads to more vulnerability. Tell me more about how you're feeling about that. Tell me about that. Right? And take every thought captive. 2 Corinthians 10:5, oftentimes our thoughts are so self-centered, or they are driven by things that are not true. Paul says, I take every thought captive. I have a choice. I have a choice about what I think about. I have a choice about how I respond. I may have a feeling, but I have a choice what I'm going to do with that. You do, and your students do, and you should remind them of that. Okay, last one. Look out. This is what she calls, Brene Brown calls rising strong. I like to call it bouncing. Teach your students to bounce. Yes?
I thought look out was the second one.
Oh, was it?
Eyes up, look out, look over.
My friend John.
Whatever you want to say.
Up. Oh, did I say number 2 was out? Yeah. Should have been in. Sorry. Up, in. It doesn't really matter. I was trying to do prepositions and over, out. Pick a preposition. Last one is bouncing. Teach your students to bounce. And yourself. Like, what do you say when you blow it? Like, what are the messages? What are you saying to yourself? And it kind of goes back with confabulation, but also just teaching them this is a part of the gig. Making mistakes is a part of it. As your teacher, I'm going to make errors, right? You as a student, what are you going to do about it? Teach them to bounce. Teach them to be resilient. If you're not familiar with Carol Dweck's growth mindset, that's a great place to head over and check out her work. She talks about this, I would say it's a vulnerability, this openness to a willingness to accept failure as a part of the process, right? It looks like we have to admit when we're wrong. We have to show them, model to them, well, how do I respond? Andrew Pite was in he was a junior in this classroom. I followed in the steps. So the school started 10 years ago, and the woman who was hired to teach English, Dr. Williams, think of the most accomplished rock star of a teacher that you can think of. Yes, that would be her. Beloved. They didn't physically do this with their arms, but they could have. They loved her. And I walked in to take her spot, and honestly, just a lot of personal transition for me. I think the only thing I really taught the students that first year was the Lord is faithful and good. And this is what it looks like to just keep getting up and walking forward. And that one day you'll be able to look back and say, look at what the Lord has seen me through. And sometimes that's what we model for students. That's the resilience. And that it's not of my own doing, of my own good, but to God be the glory. So many other things, but I will end like this. Wonder is essential. Beware of things that are hindering wonder in your life or in your student's life. Consider tools to ignite the wonder of your students. Because when they have been burdened, hindered, in fact, there is no wonder. There is no flame. But we'll see if this works. So it's going to be bad if it doesn't. But if you yourself are striving to be a person of wonder, focused on the Lord, you will then ignite your students. It worked. There you go. Last thing that worked, I didn't know if it was going to. Here it is. This is how we end. I have to read this. This is so beautiful. One of my favorite passages comes from the book of Luke. Mary, after the Lord comes to her and says, by the way, you're going to have a child. And she says, Lord, I am your servant. I am your servant. This open-handed, I'm in awe. How may I serve you? And she ends with this Magnificat. She says this, my soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked on the humble estate of his servant. For behold, from now on all generations will call me blessed. For he who is mighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the mighty from their thrones and exalted those of humble estate. He's filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he's sent away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, as he spoke to our fathers, to Abraham and his offspring forever. And Mary remained with her, Elizabeth, for 3 months, and then returned to her home. And so that's how we end. You're going to go home. You're going to return home. And the challenge is for you and I to be people who wonder, which leads us to worship. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Sam.